A little over a year after he got bail, Porngate is back to haunt businessman Raj Kundra. Raj Kundra may have been most famous for marrying actor Shilpa Shetty, but in the recent past, he's been hitting the headlines for his alleged involvement in an underground porn racket where obscene videos were shot. Sometimes, as per these allegations, against the will of the women featuring in it, and then distributed on apps and OTT platforms. Now, new details have emerged from a 450-page charge sheet filed by the Mumbai Cyber Police. Remember, Kundra was arrested in July 2021 and let out on bail in September last year. In the latest charge sheet, Kundra, along with models Sherlyn Chopra and Poonam Pandey, a film producer Meeta Jhunjhunwala and a cameraman Raju Dubey, allegedly shot the obscene or porn videos in 2 suburban 5-star hotels. These videos were then distributed on OTT platforms and apps like Banana Prime and Hot Shots. In fact, Kundra is accused of having a stake in Hot Shots through his brother-in-law. Now, the charges against Kundra are for financing this entire racket, and the police are investigating claims that women were being lured to these sets where the shoots were going on with the promise of lead roles in web series. They were then asked to shoot intimate scenes, and if they refused, they were threatened and asked to foot the bill of the entire shoot. So while the crackdown on these apps and this racket continues, the fact is that porn isn't just available but continues to thrive and flourish in India. As per one survey, Indians are the 3rd largest consumers of porn in the world, and the usage grew 33% during the pandemic. So what are the laws of the land? In short, making and distributing porn is illegal in India, but watching is not. Section 292 of the IPC is one of the many laws which deals with sale, distribution, public exhibition or circulation of any obscene book, drawing, painting. It says that any such material would be considered to be obscene, and I'm quoting here, if it is lascivious or appeals to the prurient interest or its effect is to deprave and corrupt a person. Section 293 of the IPC says it's illegal to sell, distribute, exhibit or circulate obscene objects to anyone under the age of 20 years. Section 294 of the IPC says it's illegal to perform obscene acts or sing obscene songs in any public places. Section 66E of the IT Act deals with violation of privacy and is defined as anyone who intentionally or knowingly captures, publishes or transmits the image of a private area of any person without his or her consent. This is important in the current context because we're seeing more and more cases where people are engaging in intimate acts filmed by who they believe is a trusted partner, and then it is circulated and ends up as porn. Section 67 of the IPC says it's illegal to publish or transmit obscene material in electronic form, and importantly, Indecent Representation of Women Act 1986 prohibits, of course, representation of women in an indecent manner through advertisements and publications, writings, paintings, or in any other way. By the way, do you know how many people were charged and arrested for this Indecent Representation of Women Act in 2021? Just 28. And that's the question. If there are so many laws, why is there so much porn out there? Well, maybe because watching porn is not illegal. Watching porn in the privacy of your home is not a legal offense. The freedom of watching porn privately comes under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. In 2015, the Supreme Court in a case stated that the right to watch porn in a private room falls under the right to personal liberty. However, even if watched in a private area, pornographic content showing children or violence against women will be clearly illegal. So let's put this into perspective, as Raj Kundra's case will face the test of legal scrutiny. Do our porn laws actually protect women? Is it more of a moral judgment? And what does the Kundra case tell us about the seedy business that is hidden from public view? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Pavan Duggal, cybersecurity expert, Namit Saxena, advocate with me on the show, and it's Napinai, advocate in the Supreme Court, is speaking with me today. She's also the founder of Cyber Sathi, and Jiten Jain, cybersecurity expert, also with us. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today on the show. Mr. Jain, let me begin with your perspective and what we're learning from the Raj Kundra case, because a lot of focus of it or on the case is because he's married to Shilpa Shetty, the Bollywood connection, etc., etc. And while that may excite people and hit the headlines, the fact is that there is a lot of these kind of businesses out there which are not in the net of the authorities, isn't it?
I think my friend Napinai and Pawan Nugal sir are better, placed to explain the law. But if you look at the law as a common citizen and the series of judicial pronouncements by Supreme Court, I think three things are very clear. A, watching porn is not illegal in India. Circulating adult content, but in a private space or in a private space, like we have had adult cinemas running, or this OTT platform is not illegal. This is where I think technology has created a lot of loopholes in the law, and which Raj Kundra has exploited. First, I think the foremost issue here is beyond porn is the scandal of forced consent. There was no consent involved in this all videos which have been the FIRs which have been filed. He tricked young actresses into signing up those 1 or 2 page agreements, which in some star worded clause which had written that the obscene acts or a certain exposure or the adult scene might be shot in this film, and I am fully aware of this and I'm giving my consent. I think nobody reads those agreements and they just sign. I think this is where Raj Kundra has been exploiting these women, that if you refuse to shoot those scenes, then you will have to pay for the entire shoot. And this is where these young actresses, which are not very financially well off, they got exploited. And second is this business of OTTs. I think most of these OTTs, as I've been saying in the past, some of them have literally become adult porn sites in the name of OTT, in the name of private screen. And that is where when government wanted to regulate these OTTs, I think people should have supported instead of raising them.
One minute, Jiten, 1 minute. You're talking 1 minute. You're saying the OTTs in the past have become adult porn sites. What
Tamanna,
OTTs are you talking about?
Tamanna, let me ask you a simple question. There is an absolute failure on behalf of all OTT players to perform any sort of strict age verification. They just simply give you an excuse that, look, mobile is a private space and we ask a user whether you're 18 or not 18. But what if a guy who's not 18 and he's just pressing I'm 18 and then he's watching the content? The problem is, even the reputed platforms like this star platform Ekta Kapoor, and then if you look at this series like Gandhi Baat and all, I think आप बताओ अपने घर वालों के साथ बैठ के बच्चों के साथ बैठ के देख लोगे? It is simply an adult content.
नहीं, एक minute, Jiten Jain, now you're going into a little bit, I'm sorry to say, Mr. Jain, you're going into a little bit of moral sermonizing. I'm talking about the law. अब कोई घर पे अपने परिवार वालों के साथ क्या बैठ के देखता है, वो तो सवाल ही नहीं पैदा हो रहा है.
नहीं, मैं वही आपको बता रहा हूँ.
We're talking about a pornographic racket.
These companies are formed outside India. These videos are shot outside India. They are circulated all across India. This is the technological flaw because server is located outside.
Okay, Saxena, let's talk about the technological flaw. 1 minute. Let me get Namit in. Let me get Namit in. Let me understand the technological flaw in the Raj Kundra case. Now, the Raj Kundra case, Namit, needs to be looked at in two perspectives. One is that were these women, beguiled, forced or threatened into performing acts which seemed, which made it to these pornographic videos. Those are criminal acts under different laws. And then the other question is whether they were engaging in this of their own will. Like Poonam Pandey has been mentioned in this chart sheet as someone who created her own app and shot her own videos and put them on. And we know there are precedents like this in other countries, in Western countries, where adult films are legal. There are people who do this for a living. It's all out in the open. Do you think it's very, very important to look at this case from both perspectives? One is clearly you can't force, if you force someone to do something against their will, it's a different thing. And the other is the porn laws in this country.
See, when we talk about, whether the women who participated in those videos, whether they gave their consent or not, they may have given their consent, but their consent may have been induced, is one. Second, they may have done this out of their will, but their will could have been coerced also. So when the women say that we did not give our consent out of our own free will, that is where the law comes in. You're getting me? So even if, Mr. Raj Kundra or whosoever, the other accused are, even if they say that we have got these agreements signed by them, these are their signatures, they can't dispute the signatures. But those signatures, even if they signed those agreements under coercion or misrepresentation or under an induced consent that this is going to be something else, and this will be, some private space viewing, or this will be something else, then, what has been projected actually, even that is a crime. So, before Mr. Raj Kundra and other accused to come out of it is very difficult. If the women say that, the consent was induced is one. Second, when we come to, see, porn can be categorized in many forms. For example, there can be soft porn, what, my co-panelist also said. But how do you define porn? Porn is not defined in the Indian laws. Porn, IPC or Information Technology Act, they don't define porn as such. Porn, the best definition, the classic definition of porn rather is that, I know it when I see it. And this has been followed throughout. What has been defined in IPC is obscenity, and obscenity is something which is a larger picture. Porn is just a species in that larger genus. So our laws, I think, we have laws in place, but as you also rightly pointed out, under the 1986 Act, there were only 28 convictions last year. So the laws, are they equipped enough to deal virtual spaces? And the way
The
transmission
laws, no, Namit, I think you're being generous. The laws have nothing to do with the reality of what is happening in this country. There is so much of obscenity available out there, and some of it is completely preying on people. We talked about the law which makes it illegal to film someone without their consent and then distribute it. How many cases are coming up of girls or maybe even boys who, have been filmed by who they believe is a trusted partner, and then that video has become viral? Where are the laws to deal with this?
No, that's what I'm saying, that we are not equipped enough in that framework to deal with virtual spaces and how, things get multiplied or transmitted now. The law which we are seeing, see, Section 292, 293, 294 IPC, they were made in 1860. They've been amended subsequently, even after the IT Act. But, what has happened in past 10 years, around a decade or so, the way, the world has opened up itself for transmission of material or documents or whatever, the law has to be equipped according to it. That's what I'm saying. There are only 28 convictions. 28 convictions, why? Because the number of reporting of crimes is very less. So there has to be a larger awareness about what has been happening and, in transmission on virtual spaces for obscene material. Also, see, obscenity, when we talk about obscenity is a very broad picture. The Supreme Court has multiple judgments, defined what obscenity can mean. But obscenity, again, is very subjective in nature. Something which may be obscene for you may not be obscene for me. So it depends as to how we perceive things also. So this requires a large...
That's the concern. Crackdown on illegal rackets should not turn into moral policing. NS Napinai, how do we ensure this does not happen? Mr. Jain just now talked about OTT platforms, soft porn. Can you see with your family? And from there to the Raj Kundra case, how do you differentiate?
You cannot equate each of these in the same scales, Tamanna. That is where the difficulty sometimes comes up. So when we talk about obscenity, the rule today is not the old Hicklin's test, but what we call a community standard, which is of a much higher level in the sense
Can you explain, ma'am, can you explain this Hicklin's test to us?
Yeah, Hicklin's test is the whole archaic law, which, when the earlier panelists also spoke about how old our Indian Penal Code is, and that is a legacy we have from the British. So the Hicklin's test is another legacy we have from the British in terms of how you will view obscenity. Lady Chatterley's Lover, which is a book which will not even seem mild in today's world, is something that was actually the basis for the Hicklin's test and various other aspects, a few other publications, etc. So when we talk about the Hicklin's test and the obscenity as it was perceived in those days to what we look at as community standards today, the difference is a nude painting by itself will not be considered pornography. Nudity in movies or scenes of nudity by itself will not amount to pornography. It will be looked at contextually and then decided in terms of whether it would be considered obscene, pernicious, etc., as you read out already from 292. Effectively, similar words have been captured in 67 and 67A of the IT Act also. So you asked a very pertinent question, and that ties into the earlier questions also. I want to just take a moment to address that too. You raised this question of why are there only 28 convictions? What is the problem, etc. And why are the laws sufficient? So I just wanted to address that before I came back to the other issue that you raised too. One, it is not about whether the laws are not there or not. It is not being effectively implemented. If the laws are not effectively implemented, then the trust factor in the system goes down. And that in turn affects complaints being registered. So what you really need is a show of strength for the system to show that it is working. For the system, and I'm talking about from the stage of investigation to the final disposal of a case, I'm not really picking and choosing on any singular part of the legal system. All of us form part of it, and each one of us are responsible for it, for ensuring trust in the system. So unless we show trust, it is the broken windows syndrome, where victims feel they have no remedies. You asked a question about what happens when you trust a partner and record something and they expose you online. That is colloquially referred to as revenge porn, and 90% of the time you'll hear even professionals saying there is no remedy, which is incorrect. You already read out the remedy, which is 66E of the IT Act, which says that it talks about three different things: publishing, transmission, and capturing.
Ma'am, all the laws are there. As always, India has all the laws.
Exactly my point.
We have a huge bunch of laws.
Awareness about it is necessary. Confidence of victims that they do have remedies is necessary, and that they will go ahead and file their cases, and that the system will act on it expeditiously is what we need. If it is going to drag on endlessly,
I need to come back to the point, and let me bring in Pawan Duggal here. I need to come back to the point of how do you differentiate in a situation where there is someone who is victimized, maybe filmed without her consent or his consent. I'm keeping this neutral, and those videos have been distributed or have been coerced or forced into shooting for some such film, and those that want to do this for a living, who want to shoot their own videos and put them out. How do you differentiate between this? Because the law seems to have a very broad brush, definition of obscenity, which seems to be subjective.
The law is blind. Therefore, the law does not make of this distinction when somebody else shoots your obscene videos versus you yourself shooting your obscene videos. The law is only concerned about three broad parameters: when you publish, when you transmit, or when you cause to be published or transmit in the electronic form, anything which is lascivious. Now, clearly the law does not talk pornography. It does not even use the word obscenity under the language of Section 67. It uses words which are taken from the British relic times. Anything which is lascivious or which appeals to the prurient interests, or the effect of which is to tend to deprave and corrupt the minds of those who, having regard to the relevant circumstances, are likely to see, read and hear the same. So first things first, when I publish content, I get into the ambit of criminal liability under Section 67. Unfortunately, the IT amendments in 2008 has only made it now a bailable offence. Earlier, it was a non-bailable offence. There was deterrence. Right now, there is no deterrence. Number two, the moment I transmit, even if it's my own video, once I capture it on my mobile phone, I already commit an offence under 67 of the IT Act. The moment I transmit it, I commit yet another offence under Section 67 of the IT Act. And as far as players like the platform owners or the owners of these companies who are allowing the causing to be published or transmitted in the electronic form, they equally come in the ambit of criminal liability. It's only when you are actually publishing, transmitting content that is explicit sexual content that gets more into the non-bailable kinds under Section 67A of the IT Act with 5 years imprisonment and 10 lakh rupees fine. Yes, child pornography, anything below 18, more serious, 10 years, 5 years imprisonment, 10 lakh rupees fine under section 67B. But please understand, these are only mere paper tiger provisions. Go to the police station, try to get a case registered under section 67, 67A or 67B of the IT Act. And you'll find the kind of huge challenges, because according to the police, this is one of the lowest ranking in terms of priority, the offences that they would want to register. They're more concerned with more serious offences, whether it's
because
rape,
it's a
kidnapping,
because
murder,
it's seen
but
you know, this is important,
so the time has come.
because it's seen as moral policing. Let me come back to what has been happening in the Raj Kundra case. He gets bail in 2 months. Mr. Jain, let me get you in on this. He gets bail in 2 months. He's saying he's been framed, that there are people after him. That's why his name has come up in this. Because it's also seen as who is the crime against. If the person making that video wants to, if the person watching it wants to, then who's complaining?
That's the whole thing, Tamanna. So I want to make 3 things very clear. Without going into this whole jugglery of laws, let's understand one thing. First, I think many of us are not anti-porn. I think there should be no moral policing. You want to watch porn in your house, do it. But I think putting pornographic content in garb of web series and 100% of pornographic content on unregulated apps, hosting servers in foreign countries without any censor board certification. See, we have been having adult movies in the past in India. It's not new, but they were a censor board certificate. If they say if it is 18 plus content, then somebody would verify your age and then you are allowed in a theater. But the problem with these OTT apps is that they say it is a private scheme, but there is no way they are verifying the age. 1. 2, I think most of the OTT apps, especially the ones you mentioned, Hot Shots and this Banana and all, I mean, you ask 100 people, everyone will say these are simple pornographic apps, nothing else. There is no doubt about it. But because there is no regulation in India to, control OTT apps, regulate OTT apps, or have any sort of censor board certification or age classification, in the absence of that, there is a free run. Third, I think earlier when we wanted to make a movie, someone has to be a producer. There has to be some company which will apply for a license. We are in the business of OTTs. You just buy a server in a foreign country, make an app, sit outside India and start distributing content. Now the problem is, whom do you complain? Whom do you catch? And this is the flaw Raj Kundra is exploiting. He's saying these companies are not mine. They belong to my brother-in-law who's outside India. So whom do you arrest and whom do you put inside jail? Fourth, the problem of young actresses in India who have suddenly become Instagram stars and all those things. You would know, Tamanna, if you just go out beyond this OTT app, there are at least 50 apps which are offering this influencer private app platforms where like you can have your private room. So if somebody pays you for like 500 rupee subscription every month, you send them you can send them your private photos, your private videos. And not all of them are
you're
asking,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But if somebody is actually conducting pornographic act, you cannot come to know. I think it's a bigger problem, bigger menace, and unless and until you regulate OTT act and strongly enforce age classification, I think we are going to run into a bigger problem. And last point, I think any consent which is not free and informed should be invalid. This strict consent, uninformed consent, forced consent, manipulated consent.
How will you verify?
Of a crime of
How will you
level.
verify? How will you determine if someone wants to have one of these private chat rooms as a way of earning a living? How will you determine?
So this is what I'm saying. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that as long as it is a private space. So somebody who's paying for it, you can verify the age, because nobody below 18 will have a debit card or credit card. So there are many technological ways using technology to do some sort of age classification. Now the problem is with these OTT apps which are open for all, right? And you are distributing porn in broad daylight and then manipulating young actresses to do 4 sexual acts and then show a one-page contract saying that they have given consent. What do I do? And even if I am caught, then I say that these apps do not belong to me. They belong to some third person who's sitting outside India. So I think law has to be very practical in today's sense that all these OTT platforms have to be regulated. Someone has to own up that who's the real owner, where they are sitting, about what sort of license they have. And every
Namit Saxena, do you see the loophole there as far as OTT platforms are concerned? Because there's no hardware anymore to distribute these, right?
Absolutely. This is the loophole government wanted to plug when they wanted to regulate OTT apps in the previous digital IT rules which were amended last year.
Yeah, but the fear there, Jiten, the fear there was that you were going to impose your own moral code of conduct on content. Now, here
Tamanna,
is
come
where
on. If
where there's a slippery slope. It becomes a grey area. Namit
Of
Saxena, I want
course,
you to
but if
come in
an
on this
elected
debate.
government, if it
You
is an
have
elected government,
a
elected
lot
every
of
5 years.
content. You have a lot of content, international content that everyone has. And Namit, I want you to come in on this. And everyone has access to this, which have different sensibilities, different storylines, and different kind of scenarios that they show. Is that in the same bracket as these sleazy porn movies being shot in suburban five-star hotels that we're talking about? Because Jitin Jain is seeming like he's putting them on the same platform.
No, please. See, this is what I'm trying to say. That if there is a consent, if somebody is trying to get into the and willfully, with their completely informed consent, sitting outside India, and if viewer is an adult watching it in a private set, I have no problem. I only have a problem when viewer is not an adult, and if it is not a private scene, and if there is no consent involved.
Napinai, Miss Napinai, yes.
No, I just wanted to come in to clarify on this aspect which Jitin had just mentioned. There was an interesting case in US where between two states, the law differed, where in one state, even for making and uploading of pornographic content was not considered illegal, whereas in the neighboring state itself, it was considered illegal to download or view the pornographic, for disseminating pornographic content, sorry. And in that case, even the thumbnail which was visible was considered a violation. The reason why I'm pointing out is if you have laws that are very clear in terms of saying what is permissible and what is impermissible, then it is not about jurisdiction. It can be modulated, it can be regulated within the jurisdiction where pornographic content, by whatever name called or described, is held to be illegal. What Jitin is also talking about is what we call as age gating. And age gating as a technological implementation is not difficult. We have content on various platforms, including even books and movies and etc., which we put down very specific age gating mechanisms. So you put down a PG, for instance, or adult, etc. So you may have OTT platforms which are streaming the same movies and there may be children watching. So the government cannot do everything. But at least the age gating happens to the extent of pointing out, signposting what is permissible and what is impermissible for children. And it is also up to the parents, etc., or the adults in the situation to figure out mechanisms to stop children from abusing these parental controls. There are also technology apps which can be implemented in digital devices like Pic Purify, etc., which can actually stop pornographic content from percolating. I dealt with a case where pornographic content popped up because AI picked it up. And why did AI pick it up? Because the adults were watching actually normal movies. But the movies must have had nude content, and AI's interpretation of that was that it can bring up pornographic content. And that happened when the child was viewing something. So there will be ways in which there even technological issues, safeguards may be circumvented.
And of course there is some let's be realistic. There is also over here parents have to monitor what their children are doing. You have to have, there's technology to put all of those locks in place to let you know what your child is watching on devices. Everything is shared. So if you want to monitor it,
you rely on the child to put in those technology safeguards. That's the problem.
You have to. You have to as the parent. You have to monitor as the parent.
Most of them are not familiar with technology and therefore they rely on the younger generation.
I think
that is when
Namit,
they lose the authority figure.
Namit, why I thought this was an interesting subject to take up, because all of this hullabaloo around Raj Kundra, there's many hundreds of pages of chart sheet. We'll see what actually happens in the case as it goes forward and what is proven, what is not proven. Meanwhile, it's like we're drowning in a sea of content which can be described as pornographic. Anyone has access anytime. Watching it is not illegal, but where is it coming from? Do we really have the technology to figure out what's being made in India, what's not, who is being exploited while making it, who is doing it of their free will?
See, Tamanna, we all know government banned 857 pornographic websites, etc.
Websites, correct.
but there are so many ways you can, download porn, etc. So, as Ms. Napinai also pointed out, it's government can't control everything is one. Second, for example, if I talk about there's this app and there's this website called onlyfans.com, not so regular in India. But for example, if, Mr. Jan wants to watch it, I won't say if I want to watch anything on it, but, for example, I may say that Mr. Jan wants to watch something on it. Mr. Jan pays 500 rupees, gets a private space, watches it, moves on with it. There's nothing illegal in it. Where does illegality come into picture? If Mr. Jan downloads it, transmits it without permission of the performer who is in onlyfans.com, and thereafter it goes viral without the consent of that particular person, not a clip of it, but the entire portion, if I'm saying so, that is illegal in India. But now, how do you, trace who is the originator? For example, if somebody downloads a clip and posts it on a WhatsApp group of boys where there are 256, people who are there, they transmit it further. In minutes, it will go viral like this. Now, how do you capture who was the originator, who actually downloaded it, who actually clipped it, who actually transmitted it? So it all gets very tricky. That's why I've been saying that in virtual spaces, we need something more than the existing laws to capture what has been happening and how to curb the menace of, this transmission of porn. Secondly, Mr. Napinai pointed out the Hicklin's test. That is very important to understand. See, the Hicklin's test came from this 1868 judgment by the name R versus Hicklin, where they gave a very broad test to define what is obscenity. Leave apart, pornography is comparatively a new term, but obscenity as such. If anybody's mind is corrupted to an extent, irrespective of the artistic merit, if the mind is corrupted, that will be all, covered in that in the definition of obscenity. And the example which she gave, Lady Chatterley's Lover, that novel, that is where India adopted that doctrine. So R versus Hicklin, the Hicklin's test is a valid doctrine in India. So if you have to test something, whether this material is obscene or not, what do you apply? The doctrine you apply is Hicklin's test. That is very, very broad. That is why I said, what is porn? So the answer is, I know it when I see it. But that is again subjective. Something which is porn for you may not be porn for somebody else.
So porn it depends in the eyes of the beholder.
Yes, it does.
But exploitation is clear.
He's saying the content I made is not pornography. They are adult intimate scenes. This is a ploy to get away. I think we should not get into this debate of what is porn, soft porn, adult or intimate scenes. I think there is a bigger and the singular question here. Were those acts performed under duress and without consent? I think that is the bigger issue, and you should not get away with that.
How will you determine that? Maybe the person under pressure might turn around and say something. We don't know. Okay, Ms. Napinai wants to come in. Yes, ma'am.
That the Supreme Court has struck down the Hicklin's test and it's no longer valid law in India, and it has now moved to the community standards test, which places it at a much wider angle in terms of allowing for aesthetic content, etc. So I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, that's fine. But we're coming down to porn laws. Many of them hardly applied, largely redundant, not in touch with the reality of today's technology. And Mr. Duggal, my biggest question, and what Mr. Jain is saying is correct, is it really protecting vulnerable people? At the end of the day, that's what we care about, right?
Yeah.
That people aren't coerced, people aren't tricked, people aren't blackmailed into becoming the subjects of these videos. Yes, Mr. Duggal, go ahead.
The law is not concerned about the feelings of the victim. I said, unfortunately, the law is not at all concerned with the feelings of the victims. The law has only come up with some provisions which have got no connection with ground reality. Mind you, when we came up with Section 67 of the IT Act, it was 22 years back. Mind you, when you came up with Section 67A and 67B of the IT Act, it was 14 years back. Since then, there's a huge sea change. Today, if you are a victim of any obscene content being filmed, well, you can go for under 66E, but then police hardly registers any case. What kind of a remedy do you have? Effectively, you have no remedy. The only hope that you have is maybe your obscene content is going to be buried under much more content and ultimately may not be catching the eyes or the attention of the search engine. I think the law needs to be more sensitive towards the victims of these kinds of abuses. Unfortunately, Section 67, 67A and 67B of the IT Act do not provide the requisite kind of a human touch remedy that should be there. Right now, you're all treated as just entities. Well, if you had it, no problem, but the law is not really going to come to your rescue, nor is the reporting mechanism either sensitive enough so as to understand the sensibilities of the victim at the time when it's reporting. Yes, the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, being cybercrime.gov.in, does allow for anonymous reporting, but that's only reporting. The actual cases that ultimately get registered into FIR is very, very less. On top of it, trying to get these people to go ahead and be prosecuted under law is itself such a big challenge, because most of the time you will not be able to prove the relevant incriminating electronic evidence that's going to be the basis of these kinds of criminal actions. So I think we require a completely new approach towards making more effective, expeditious remedies available. I'm reminded of this case versus Union of India, where this girl who was a law school student suddenly found that her normal photographs had been taken and her face morphed on the body of a nude model. And then this was all the pornographic websites.
Exactly.
And her
that
name
is not
was tagged along.
unknown. You're absolutely right. Mr. Duggal, that's absolutely right. Women are often targeted. We are in the era of deep fakes where all of this can be done. My question is that, yes, go after Raj Kundra. Please look at all the illegality done. Bust all the rackets you can. Mumbai Crime Branch should file this 450-page charge sheet. What are they doing about the rest? How are you ensuring women are safe, girls are safe, that they are not being terrorized because of some picture they put up online and then someone wants to morph it? Where is all that action? Where are those laws? That's the question we need to ask today. I want to wrap this here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us on the show this evening. We're taking a very small break, but on the other side, the big story of the day. It's an all-star